You are listening to Unfuck Your Mind with the real, raw, colorful, authentic, empowering, control profanity-loving human Zach Lyotis, soul activator, master key holder, and intergalactic elder. Zach loves to find lessons in adversity to advocate humanity one listener at a time. She also enjoys having fun along the way. Check her out at zachlyotis.com to see what she's up to. But for now, let's pass it off to Zach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfuck Your Mind. I'm your host, Zach Lyotis. And in today's podcast, I have Diane A. Curran. She is the Wow Whisperer as a branding and marketing expert and speaker with a keen creative perspective on the good, the ugly, and the extraordinary in modern media. Long steeped in the world of fine arts and metaphysics, Diane is equally passionate about marketing as her high-performance communication. Author of the biz book Trilogy, The Marketing Deck, she hosts the podcast Wow Whispering. Welcome, Diane. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, Zach, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
And it's so interesting because I know you're the wow whisperer, but I want to say woo because I'm so woo that everything's wow, but woo. So if I messed up there, I'm sorry.
I love that because you're the first person who's coined that. And it's like, okay, let's go with that. Let's enjoy. So many times when people in the world of wow, they're expressing an energy. And it's an energy that is actually hard to define. It's hard to describe it or define it. And so in many ways, I suppose some people could say, well, that's very woo.
Yeah, but it's really wow too. The woo is wow, and the wow could be woo. So, yeah. Thinking about it and feeling the energy of it, it just feels so in alignment with both.
It does. And it's a word that I will tell you that if you were to ask anybody to define it, most people would not have a definition. And the nifty thing is it's a word that's been around since 16th century Scotland. So it's been around. That's the first documentation of seeing it in writing. And I notice that people know when to say it, and they have a sense of what's calling it forth from them. And it could be something spectacularly fabulous, or it could be something shocking and unexpected. But it's always very spontaneous. Don't you find that about it?
Yeah, and it's so funny that you say that because you almost brought me back to certain situations where I'd be like, wow. Yeah. And here I am. I can't even, the words are not coming to my mouth when I'm talking about you as wow because I feel woo in what I'm doing. And that it's like, woo, wow. But it's so true. It just comes out naturally. It's coming from that place of, the inner excitement, the inner curiosity, the inner knowingness, not the conscious knowingness, but the subconscious knowingness. And I guess that's why you call yourself the Wow Whisperer, because something whispers it from inside of you.
There you go. There's two sides to it. And I always look at, sometimes when people are attracted to other people, especially say public personalities, they look at them as flamboyant and extravagant and very, I'm going to say, like a strong physical presence, a strong dynamic presence. And yet there's another side. There's always the whispering side. There's the silent and quiet side. And some people are incredibly magnetic without ever saying a word. So I love, if you will, the yin and the yang, the going back and forth between the expressive and the intimate. The brash sometimes and shocking, and then that which sneaks up on you. And, whispering has two sides as well, right? It has the side where it's like a whispering breeze, and then a side like, ooh, the whispers that are in the background that aren't necessarily where you want to go and follow. So we always have a choice, if you will. Which pathways are we going to follow? Which pathways are we going to claim?
Oh, I love that. So you brought me to so many visuals because, just with my own gifts, I have the visual, I have the feeling, I have like all these beautiful things that I work with. And it's like when you brought us to that place, like that wow of just that little whisper or that whisper maybe that we don't want to hear. It's like I see this dark cloud. It's almost like this darkness and the clouds and the blue sky, but then there's this like a lone home that has this scary feeling to it. It's just like, do I want to or do I not want to?
Well, you and I were talking a moment ago about how we're in the energy of the aftermath of a big old eclipse, which is a lunar eclipse. That's the only one that's going to be it had so many names, the wolf, super, blood moon, all these elements where, in ancient days, people feared eclipses, said, the world is ending, the sun is going out, we'll never have, vibrancy and life again. And then it would pass. And something would happen energetically that could not be, if you will, seen or predicted in advance, because sometimes it takes a while for energy to manifest. Don't you find that to be true?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the more that we allow for us to just be in it and trust it and not be so attached to it, it comes so much faster. And it's just like the joy of it. I tried yesterday, like I was telling you previously, I tried so hard to stay awake so I could see the blood moon. And it was like, I just heard you are the moon. Just go to sleep. You can't be fighting this. And I caught the moon in the morning when I was supposed to catch it. It spoke to me in the morning. But let's get to this marketing and high performance communication, because I believe in the era that we're in right now, there's so much communication, but at the same time, there's so much suffering. So the wow whisperer, like we spoke about earlier, the two-sided, it's exactly how I'm feeling. We have so much wisdom and communication, yet there's so much suffering. There's so much awakening. It's like the yin and the yang of life that's going on right now. So let's talk about your branding and marketing, and how is it that you bring life to people on this planet in so many different ways?
As a young kid, being immersed in art and writing and all of that, I swore in the 6th grade that I would never do advertising or marketing. Well, first of all, that should have been my first clue. What kid does that?
That's funny.
But I did end up fascinated by it, because I thought, what is all this that's being communicated, whether it's in newspapers or on radio or on television or, on ads that we can buy on buses and subways. I would look at all of it and think, what is being communicated here? I just was fascinated by it. And I would get drawn into certain things and I would be repulsed by others. So when I decided that, this is one of those things where the universe comes along and says, excuse me, Diane, but you're not going to go in the direction of working in a hospital for your career. You're going to go off and you're going to try and piece together something. And by the way, it's going to be advertising. I said, what? That can't be true. And I literally had a dream one night. This was before the dream. In real life, my roommate and a friend of hers who was a stained glass artist and I were walking out in this incredible snow in Boston one night. It was a beautiful snowy night with, it coming down where you could literally hear it. And I said, I'm really struggling financially. I've got to figure out what to do. And this stained glass artist said, well, maybe you could go work for a publisher. You could go downtown to Boston and you could work for one of the publishers there as maybe an art director. I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I guess I could do that for a year and, get my money thing all organized. So I went to sleep and I had this very bizarre dream. And in the dream, I was in this dark space and I was following along and I went to this old rickety building. I'd gone on this weird elevated subway. I couldn't figure out what that was about. I went on this elevated subway to an old building where they had an old-fashioned elevator run by a guy. I mean, it was literally an elevator guy, and that was not that common, even, in the early 70s where I was. And I went up to the 6th floor, and there were all these people working there doing some sort of job, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I applied because I thought, well, I want to do that job. And I thought, well, I don't know what this is. So I woke up the next morning and I said, oh, Diane, you're crazy. You can't just go downtown to a publisher and announce that you want to be an art director. You need a what do you call those things? An employment agency. So back in the days of the Yellow Pages, I pulled out this big fat book of Yellow Pages and I looked under employment agencies. And every single one of them had giant pictures of women answering telephones and being secretaries. And I thought, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. So I kept looking and looking. I found a teeny little 2-line ad that said graphic arts personnel. That's for me. So I called them up, and they asked me questions to which I had all the wrong answers. And they said, oh, we think we know a company that might be interested in you. I said, okay. So I went and applied for the job. They didn't have a job for the thing he said he was going to present me for. But they had a job where I could work in the billing department until this other job in customer service opened up. And he said, the only trouble is, in the billing department, you have to work with this grouchy old lady. I said, oh, that'll be fine. So I thought, this will be good because I'll learn everything about the company. If I'm typing up their invoices, I'll know what their business is. So I did. Lo and behold, they liked me. I got promoted. And it wasn't until 2 weeks after my training that I went out for lunch. And I walked downstairs, and I just decided I was going to walk around in the neighborhood, which was a bad neighborhood. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is an elevated subway. The elevator has a man who runs the thing. It's on the 6th floor where I work now. I dreamt about this.
Wow. See, wow.
I was blown away.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I didn't tell a soul. I thought, keep this under your hat.
Yeah.
I didn't know why, right?
Yeah.
But I had decided I would work there for a year. Well, 15 and a half years later, I completed my time there.
That's enormous. 15 years later.
I had 7 promotions, so they obviously continued to like me. I did every possible kind of job there was. But to answer your question, Zach, here's what I really discovered. I discovered that marketing was about communicating value. And if you didn't do that, you didn't do your job. And there are plenty of people out there not doing it right. And it really was not okay with me. And I found that I was interested in clients who really had something wonderful to offer. Because I knew I had something wonderful to offer them. And if they had something wonderful to offer the world, wouldn't it be great to work together? And somehow that, you could call it woo-woo idea, really fascinated me enough and kept me in the game enough that I realized, you know what, there is something to this. There's something of value here. And it's communicating something that makes a difference and adds to somebody's life, whether it's a business to business thing or a business to consumer thing, whatever. You know, I knew all the terminology, but really, that felt like worth doing. And since there were plenty of messages out there that could be either misleading or distracting or, you know, not really about exchanging value, I wanted to be a voice that would support people who were bringing something wonderful to the world, because we need that.
Yes. And we need it a lot more now, I feel, than ever, because there's so many things happening in our world right now that I feel the communication, as much as we have it, I feel it's still broken.
Oh,
not fully communicative. It's like, you know, I could hear spirit saying to me, like, this fake media stuff. It's like, well, they're giving you what you really don't need to fully hear, but they're not giving you the stuff that you should really be paying attention to. They're distracting you from so many different avenues that you should really be paying attention to. And it's funny because I don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV for 5 years. I don't watch TV. You know, if I hang out at my brother's house, I'll watch TV, but I tap into the universal's energy, and that's my TV. That's my antennas, you know. Go into, you know, the computer and type in this, and I'll type, I'm like, oh, they don't talk about this on the news.
Right. You and I are in the same pathway. I don't have a television either. And I'm in the world of media, and I haven't had one for a long time. I don't need one.
No.
That's not the main method of communicating. And it's fascinating because I have as much news and information as I could possibly want. I have access to, you know, I remember years ago, a friend of mine said, when Google was just beginning to kind of be understood and known, she said, well, there's no longer any excuse for an unanswered question. I thought, well, that's quite the statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you're going to get correct answers or accurate answers, but it means you're going to have a lot of access to information. And I'm with you. It makes me crazy to hear the kinds of, I remember when I was a kid in school, I loved history. And one of the things, and I love civics, and I remember studying disinformation and propaganda and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, that is really scary. I'm so glad we're past most of that now. Well, lo and behold, we are not past that now.
Yeah.
It's come back with a vengeance to really try and, if you will, claim the power. It can't do it because it's essentially destructive, and destruction doesn't have what it takes to sustain a universe, pure and simple.
Doesn't last long, exactly.
But it certainly puts up a big fight and is inherently destructive. So it kind of sucks in, I'm going to say naive energy, oftentimes well-intended energy, but maybe innocent energy. And so it requires all of us to kind of grow up in the communications arena, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that on so many levels. And it's sad that our world is going the way it's going, but at the same time, it's interesting because when you guys had a switch of your presidents, and I'm not going to give energy to the one that's there now, but I had a message from the divine, and it said, this is the way it needs to go in order for the awakening process to happen much quicker.
I never expected to live in a country where this was what was representing us to the world. Let me just say it that way.
Yeah.
And having said that, it has really caused everyone to have to address, well, what do I stand for?
Mm-hmm.
Where's my humanity?
Yes.
And how committed to what I say I'm committed to, am I committed to it? And things like, for example, joy and peace and I'm going to say trust and dignity and honor. Those are words that have really a responsibility attached to them. And boy, is it taking something to learn what that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But like Spirit said, it's activated the awakening process and the unity process and the love process on such a deeper level. There's still a lot of work that we have to do just as human beings in order to continuously activate that and to stop maybe ignoring certain things. I know sometimes I'm just like, I'm just not going to think about that because it has nothing to do with me. But then Spirit will bring me back into that meditation and go, this has a lot to do with you. So we're not letting you ignore this. Your ego could ignore it, but your spirit's part of it. So I totally understand that. But there's just so much. So how do you help people through this process for them to be able to get their communication out to the world so they can be heard? Because my whole thing is for people, I help people come out in a bold, fierce, unstoppable way. Go out there and speak your truth, stand in your power, recognize who you are. So how do you take people through that process?
So when I work with clients, I bring to them a few different things. And I bring a real strong visual sense. I bring a real strong verbal messaging sense. But I bring something even more important, and that is that I bring listening. Mm-hmm. What I mean by listening is I listen really in three ways. I listen to what that person is saying to me. Mm-hmm. I listen to what is not being said by them. And I listen to what their audience is hearing in the world already. And what we do is we work at and we look at how those three need to come into alignment. And so in many ways, it is really always a good idea to have someone that is not you hearing your message, who can be, I'm going to say, constructively direct and honest and supportive of you, coming to what it is that's wanted and needed and how best to say it in a way that not only reaches the person, but that you can stand behind, because it enlivens you to have your message coming out in words that are who you really are, authentic to you, and are going to be really reaching someone's ears where they say, I'd like to hear more.
Yes.
It is a very, I'm going to say I've used a fair amount of words to say that, but you get that it is a flow of energy. And it's how I arrived at something. I said, when I was writing my first book, I thought, Marketing is high performance communication. What does that mean? Well, let me go to the world of acting and athletics to really get what I mean by that. If you think about it, when an actor is on stage, they are saying very carefully crafted words in a very particular way to give you the strongest energy experience in the shortest amount of time. And that's what makes for compelling theater and movies and radio shows and podcasts. It's what makes people say, oh, I want to hear more. I'm interested. I'm invested in this character. Now, an athlete does it in a slightly different way. They practice and practice and practice until they gain a skill. And then they go into competition. And the competition can either be with a team of other people, or it can be as a solo performer who's got to reach a high or get a 10 or, run faster. You are, in a sense, competing against yourself, or you're competing with others against a goal or an idea. And you have to do your best to be effective in short spurts of time, quickly, relying on your skills, but also relying on the energy and your presence in the moment. And that is high performance that communicates a winning spirit, don't you think?
That is, I love that you're saying that, because as you're saying this, of course, I'm having 10 different conversations. I'm very attentive to what you're saying because it's really grabbing my attention. But then Spirit's going, yeah, that's where you have difficulties, really expressing yourself. Like you could work with, and this is Spirit talking to me. It's like, you could work with people, but you have a hard time conveying your message. I'm like, yeah, I do. But she makes sense. Like she's the individual speaking, she's listening to what they're saying, but she's really feeling them, and she's the audience. So she's in 3 different places at once. And then Spirit says to me, where are you? And I'm like, I have no idea where I am. I'm just here right now. Because as empaths or light workers or woos, whatever title you want to use, I've heard this quite frequently, is that we have a hard time expressing what we want to say. And it's so, I've been having this struggle since, I was told to do this as a career. It's like, people say to me, Zach, what's your target audience? And I'm just like, people that want change. Oh, what does that look like to you? And I'm like, oh man, what doesn't it look like to me? Like, where do you want me to start? And it's so hard to put in words what I'm trying to express. And, I just wrote something, and, I gave it to a couple people to read, and it's like, this is really powerful. Who are you sending it to? And I'm like, the people I want to work with. Oh, I think you need to bring it down a bit. And I'm just like, but I thought I brought it down already, like 5-fold, So it's like you bring magic. It's like what I'm feeling as you're speaking to me and Spirit speaking to me. It's like you bring magic to like the bridge. That's like, you're the magical bridge between what I'm saying, what I'm feeling, and what someone else is hearing.
Yeah. And what people are hearing oftentimes has nothing to do with the moment and you and what you're saying. It has everything to do with what got them to this moment in time. And it's all the backstory. It's also whatever else they're hearing. And here's an interesting example of an attempt at humor that really fails miserably as a marketing message. I'm very conversant in the world of networking, and oftentimes people are required to speak quickly with just a few words their value. And I've noticed that sometimes people in the skincare business will say, for example, as a way to be, I'm going to say, humorous and well-liked and so forth, they say, oh, well, my market is anybody that has skin. To which I say, nonsense. That is not true. The reason I say that is that, do you go in and work with people who are in burn units in hospitals? If you do, then say that. If you are someone who works with little babies who have a rare skin condition, then say that. But if you don't work with that, you can't say anybody who has skin.
Yes.
You can't say that. It's not true. Do you work with geriatric patients who are dealing with the effects of cancer on their skin? In other words, you've got to be specific and look at, who do you really intend to work with? Who lifts your spirit? Who are you equipped to and prepared to and skillful enough to work with? Let's make that powerful. Because if not, you're not saying what needs to be heard so people know how to support you, how to consider whether their favorite person in life is a good fit for you because they want that person to have the best of everything. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit more to it, isn't there?
There's a lot to it. And I had to learn the whole process. And it took me, I've been doing this for 6 years now. And, I used to be like, I want to work with a depressed person because I've been through depression. I get it. I want to help them. Then I worked with a few people going through depression. And, and my first question is, are you ready to divorce depression? Because if you're not ready to divorce depression, I can't work with you. And it might sound so blunt and so rude, but you have to be that way with depression. I know because I've been down that path so many times. And, just 3 years, I always say 3 years. I don't even know how long it's been, but probably 3 years because that's the number that's coming to me. 3 years ago, I said to depression, you and we're not married anymore. We're getting a divorce. Like, you need to sign the paper now because I'm never going to meet up with you again. Because I always would say 2 years happiness, 1 year depression, 2 years happy. And it would always be that same pattern until I had to break that pattern. So people would come to me and like, Zach, I'm going through some hard times. I'm like, okay, so let's just name it depression. Or, well, I don't have depression. I'm like, okay. You don't want to give it that title, but when you look at how you're feeling, when you look at what you're saying to yourself, when you look at your emotions and all these other things, it's categorized as depression. So let's just come to terms with the word depression first and foremost. It's not a bad word. It's not one that's going to kill you, but it's one that's going to free you. Because it freed me. I get it. I never even knew what depression was until I went through this deepest, darkest time 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And once I divorced it, I became so liberated by it. And that's why I tell people, are you ready to divorce it for good? Because if you're not, I can't work with you because you're going to continuously go back. And this work sometimes isn't easy, but we can make it fun. And then when we make it fun and you start receiving, like how you're saying, yeah, you could receive, you're going to want to be more of it. But sometimes an old trigger might come back that could bring you back into that path. And it's just understanding that. So I learned to communicate certain things. And now it's like, I had to sit with myself and say, who do you really want to work with now? Who do you want to work with, kid? Be clear. You've heard this for the last 6 months. Be clear, be clear, be clear. It's not everyone that has skin. It's not everyone that wants to, be spiritual because you are spiritual. You're just getting to know who you are. So it's interesting how you're bringing that all to focus. And I find a lot of people have that difficulty in their marketing, in their messaging. And I'm included in that. I'm not any better than anyone. I've always said it's been my biggest struggle. If I could have someone that could just read my mind and write it the way they have to write it, go ahead. But it's just that beauty that you bring the woo and the wow together. And that's what I find so fascinating with what you do.
Well, I'm very blessed to have been given the opportunity to walk on this path. And this path is a multifaceted path with several doorways along the way. Mm-hmm. And none of who I am as a private person needs to be excluded. In fact, it is a source of the humanity that I feel is essential for marketing. Because if marketing doesn't have humanity and value in it, then it's hype. And it isn't marketing. It's actually a con. In fact, can I tell you that I was so challenged when I was rebranding my own business, and I was in the process of publishing my first book, which used a deck of cards, and people said, oh, you got to call yourself the marketing deal because your book is the marketing deck, so you got to call yourself the marketing deal. And I thought, do I dare take that on in the context of how that word deal is perceived? Mm-hmm. I thought, well, yes, of course you have to take it on. You're going to take it on because that'll be interesting. And what I find myself doing is saying, look, if something doesn't have substance that brings something that's wanted and needed by both parties or all three parties, whoever is participating in this arrangement, then it's not a deal, it's a con. And let's just call it what it is. Because if you aren't making a contribution, then you're detracting. There's no, in other words, in the world of duality, it's either on or it's off. The switch is on or the switch is off. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to limit ourselves to the world of duality, but we oftentimes do work in that world. So we want to look at what dualities are we actually dealing with.
Yes,
So deal is one of those hot button words for me that's, oh my gosh, I still have more to say about this, I guess.
Yeah, it's so true. It is your vocabulary too, right? Like I found that, and some people say to me, well, why don't you switch that word up? I'm like, well, what word do you want to replace it with?
Yeah.
What is it that you could replace it with? Because I find that word extremely activating to the person I want to attract. And Absolutely. They might not get it, but they'll feel it.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes joke, I say, I know how to clear a room really fast. I just tell people I do marketing. It's like, oh no, I'm running away now. Yeah. A business without marketing is not going to be a business very long. And marketing and sales are not the same word for a reason. So there's lots to really having if one is in the world of business, and by the way, I apply this to not-for-profit organizations, and I apply it to community organizations, and they are all in, we'll call it a mission and a purpose and a set of goals to accomplish something. And that shares a lot with business when it's done well. So the tools that we use for communication are essential to gathering people together for a common purpose. And we need more common purposes, don't we?
Yeah, especially this day and age. And that's why, it's so funny because I've been hiding behind a computer for many years. And this is the year where Big, Bold, and, Bold, Fierce, Unstoppable came out. Because at the end of the day, it was like, okay, stop. Like I got, pretty beat up not beat up, but they gave it to me really good in 2018. It said, enough of this hiding behind the screen, enough of this not going out there and really showing who you are, enough hiding. Get out of this closet. You always think you're out of the closet, but you're not out. And I'm just like, fine, I own who I am. I own my voice. I recognize who I am. And I'm going out there now. And it's so funny because it was like, who do I want to work with? And this is the most important thing. Who do you want to work with? And, I start working with a coach, and she was beautiful, but she only wanted to work with women. And it was always like, the woman. I'm like, but what about our men? Like, I feel that we're creating so much separation already in the world. Mm-hmm. And now here's women, when women are great at supporting one another, and they're just as great as knocking each other down, depending on which realm you want to be on. But I can't leave the men out. I just can't. My soul can't do it, anything. And I tried this whole thing. I actually, Diane, I put it to the test. I'm like, I'm looking for empresses out there. I want the and as I was saying it, I could feel my soul dying inside of me. Mm. And it was like, but how about the emperors? How about those guys?
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because Spirit gave me a 6-month timeout and said, figure it out. And I said, okay. So my 6 months is up now. I figured it out. I called it life activations. It's for men and women that are ready to become activated.
Great.
And I couldn't cause any more separation in the world with men and women because there's so much detachment, so much, women want their equal rights, and I get it. I'm a woman. I understand it. But men also want to be heard. They want to feel vulnerable. They don't always want to be this strong guy that everyone imprints that they should be, So it's like, okay, Zach, you have a good balance of both energies. You know this. People have told you this. So how can you support both? And I said, you know what? It's about them coming together and sharing each other's story. That's all it is. They could talk about how they feel about the women could talk about how they feel about the men. It's not an argument. It's really about getting to know one another. Men are for Mars, women are for Venus, right? And it's just like, no, we're all here on this earth, and we got to figure this out together. Because when we come together, we are more powerful together. So I sat with Spirit for the longest time, and I had this conversation, and I was supposed to have a retreat with just women. And I prayed for a month on this because it just didn't feel complete to me. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I heard, you know what to do, so why do you continue praying? call the men in. The men need it. And I'm just like, fine, I surrender. Men, I'm never gonna just have women only. It's just it has to be both right now, because that vibration of the divine masculine, divine feminine together is so explosive. It's beyond words when you feel it. So it became so crazy. So now I'm on this new whole branding thing. So you came in at a perfect time to say, yes, words are important. It's like the elite athlete. It's like a piece of artwork. Mm-hmm. How are you going to now convey that? You know, I see the group of 7 coming forward now. I've channeled the group of 7 before, and it's just like, whoo, here they all come. And that's exactly how you're going to do. What is your art piece and communicative way? And this is where you come in for a lot of people.
It's true. And, you know, one of the other avocations I have is I'm a docent at a museum where I get to guide people through an experience of looking at art. And much of the art that is in traditional museums is done by men. And it's done by men because that is the system that was in place that allowed for that to occur. And particularly in Europe, which is, you know, the museum I work in is mostly European art. Mm-hmm. What I've done is I've made it my business to really get underneath that and think about, well, what was the system and why was it in place, and what about that, and bring to people the humanity of these artists, because they were grappling with their own issues. It wasn't like, oh, now I'm a man, therefore it's easy. No, they had all kinds of things to deal with in terms of the guild system and the apprentice system and the what were you painting and who was giving you permission and all that stuff that we as human beings deal with. And so I have fun with people on my tours because I always leave them with more mysteries than answers, because there are more mysteries about history. There's much that we don't know because it wasn't written down to answer the specific question we're asking now. So we have to be detectives for looking at, so what are the patterns in place already, and what are the new opportunities we haven't yet explored as a species? And we better get cracking because we've got some repair work to do for our impact on the planet, and no kidding about that. And what I mean by that is our impact not simply on the elements, but also on other species and on our own species. We've got to really take the best of masculine and feminine energy, put it together, and really get it to work. I am very excited about the upcoming generations. Can I tell you that? Because I feel like they came in with their own unique flavor, and they're ready to take it to the next level. And some of us who've been around here fighting in the trenches for a while had best invite them in with honor and appreciation, because we need all the allies we all can get. They need us, we need them. And I feel like I'm very excited about what's on the horizon, because if we can see it and envision it, we can create it.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. And I always talk about our future generation, because I see my niece, she's 9 years old. I love her to pieces. She's wise as an owl. You know, she's awakened. She listens to a lot of things I say. She sits and she dissects things. And I look at her and I'm like, yo, like, you're not 9 years old. And I've always said that to her as a kid. So I look forward to see the change that they could bring forth, that the change that we created suffering in. And that's why a lot of this energy is coming back, because our planet needs help. Our planet needs help. Every element, I think, of our planet needs help more than anything. So I love how you put your art and marketing and communication and sports, like you just bring everything all together in such a beautiful, eloquent way to show us it's more than what you may be reading out there. It's more than what you may be feeling out there. Recognize different aspects. A great athlete needs to, train to get to that finish line. A great author has to fail a few times at that book, or for me, my grade 1 teacher telling me I'm never going to amount to anything. And it still sits with me. And I sits with me in the knowingness of, you know what? If you've passed away, I hope you're watching me right now, because you kept me going thinking I wasn't good enough. you know? And that's what it really comes down to. It's really in the power of that struggle that you recognize your strength. And in that communication, you know, people say, what's your favorite book? And I said, The Thesaurus. Like, really? I'm like, I love the thesaurus. I remember my sister when I was younger, she'd always give me the thesaurus. I'm like, just give me the words. Forget about the thesaurus. But now it's like, she says to me, man, your writing got better. And I was never the writer. I was the one that used to look at people's writings and be like, I wish I could write like that, but I'm not good enough. And you know, now I write and I'm thinking, you know, I'll write spirits channeling through me. I'll read it again. I'm like, did I write this or did I copy this from someone? And I hear spirit go, no, that's your original. And I'm like, you know what? I'm good.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about struggle, and we'll say the opposite of struggle. Could we say that's ease, or we could say it's support? But you know, in the example of writing you just gave, I had two experiences. One was in high school, one was in college a year later. And in high school, I had a wonderful English teacher, and I had to do a paper for him, and I wrote it about Epictetus, who said, if you wish to be a writer, comma, write. And I thought, and there you go. And then I had some thoughts beyond that, but that was the focus of the paper. And then I went to college, and I was in an honors history course, and I got a terrible mark on my first paper. That you're asking more questions than you're answering, and that's really not at all what I want. And this is just a terrible paper. And I thought, I must be inadequate. So I thought, I got support and I got struggle. And so both of those together sat there, but the struggle voice was louder, and we'll say the harsh voice was louder. Not even so much struggle, the harsh voice. Yeah. But then eventually the desire to write this book just couldn't be put off any longer. And everything cleared itself out of my life. It's like, thou shalt write the book. And I remember, though, when I was in the throes of it and I was talking with other people who have written a full book, and I remember at one point saying, well, you know about writing a book. He said, if it doesn't kill you, at the end of it, you'll have a book.
Yeah.
Well, that just lightened me right up.
It's so true.
It was a trial by fire to write that book and then get to the end, knowing that it would never be perfect, the first book and the first version of it, the first edition of it. But getting to the end where it could literally show up in paper was an accomplishment. And now you learn a whole bunch after that. That's not the end. That's chapter one of your writer's life, right?
So true. That is so true. You know, I could see this guy that I was in English class with, and he was the most incredible writer. He would write his stories, and I'd say, I would pay you to write mine. And he'd look at me and he'd say, Zach, just go write. And we were the same age, but his parents encouraged him to write. You know, my parents told me that I wasn't good enough sometimes, you know. And I'd read his stories. I'd say, how did you even think of this? He goes, I just write what my imagination shows me.
Ah, magnificent.
And what a great place to start. And, you know, I guess my imagination as a kid, because I had this gift to be able to connect to spirit since I was really young, it was a place where I wasn't allowed to be because it was bad, right? 20 years ago, I'm 45 now. I'm very proud to say my age because I don't feel like I'm 45, but like, you know, say 40 years ago, or, you know, say even 30 years ago, to be in that realm, it wasn't like the way it is now. Now it's accepted to be a woohoo or a weirdo, or she speaks to dead people or spirits, whatever it is. Back then, I had to run out of the doctor's office because he almost would put me in a psychiatric ward thinking I was going crazy.
Yeah, you learn to be very quiet.
You box yourself up and your imagination goes with that. So there's so many beautiful tidbits that we just spoke about here today, and just do, be, have, recognize, communicate, look at different aspects. This conversation has been, I want to keep on going, but it's just, I got to get you back on here because it feels like it was such a fulfilled conversation with so much grace and beauty. And once you tap into that, magic rolls out of it. And
it
so
is my pleasure to be with you, Zach. I agree. We have many realms to explore in conversation.
Yes, I could feel it. And just even when we got on, to talk before we even started the whole podcast, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. But I keep on hearing Spirit say, be mindful of the time, because I could get carried away. I could have a 4-hour conversation when I'm into it, and this is what it's all about, is having those just open, free conversations and just allow. And this is exactly what we had here today. And
Yay.
I want to thank you for your service and being the voice maybe for those that don't know how to express themselves, because there's a lot of us out there. And thank you for being the bridge to help bring us to the other side.
Well, Zach, thank you for being the bridge for our conversation to be with the people that we can't see right in front of us, but we know that we've got their ears and they are making a difference in the world. And it's my pleasure to be with you and your listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, that was amazing. Everyone, Diane's social handles, they're in the show notes just below. If you need that bridge to be able to communicate from the fine art to the elite athlete to who you are inherently in your divine birthright, in your own essence, without the veil, without the capes that you're holding on to, whatever those rosy glasses are, take them off, throw them away, smell the roses, become in tune with you. Contact Diane, get in tune with what you want to convey to the world, and really stand in that power. You know that this is being bold and this is being fierce, and the unstoppable becomes that sequence of becoming who you are. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here again for Wise Women Wednesdays. And it's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with Diane. And Diane, hopefully I could have you back here again to have another conversation with you.
It would be my pleasure.
Yay. So everyone, just go down to the show notes to get a hold of Diane. And thank you for being here. We will connect with you again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Unfuck Your Mind. Head over to iTunes and leave your 5-star review and comment to get uprising the charts so we can get this incredible wisdom into more ears worldwide. In the show notes, you'll find all affiliate links to what we've mentioned in the podcast or products Zach loves to use. Until we connect again, unfuck 1% of your thoughts and watch how your life shifts.